Hi, my name is Crystal Morris, and I'm giving my formal presentation for Dr. Gier's Giuseppe Verdi class. The article I was assigned was Philip Gotts's Verdi and Ghislanzoni and Aida. Basically, this is Philip Gossett. Initially, he gives his take on the letters between Verdi and Ghislanzoni, and he really discusses like how important they really are. And he also states his disgust in the handling of the letters between the two, and he also offers his alternative to how the letters have been handled thus far. Um, as we know, Verdi, is an awesome composer. He was an extraordinary man and composer, and he was called by many the grand old man of Italy. In 1979, Philip Gossett writes an article critiquing the handling of the letters between the librettists, of course, dealing with Aida. As we know, Verdi had no issues communicating with his librettist. He was very blunt, and he had high expectations. Before we discussed the libretti and the librettist composer relationship between Verdi and Ghislanzoni, we must first discuss this commission work. In 1870, Verdi finally accepted the offer to compose Aida after declining it due to several different conflicts of interest. According to Mary Philip Mott's Verdi biography. Prior to this, Verdi had written operas with librettos, and he really felt like he was just accepting far too many libretti that was mediocre, and he almost bullied his librettos into greatness, as we should say. They just simply weren't working up to his standards. So this is another reason why accepting Aida was very difficult. He just had very many doubts regarding the authorship. Verdi in his letters to Ghislanzoni. Finally, Verdi chooses Antonio Ghislanzoni as the librettist for Aida. And naturally, when this relationship began, of course, dozens and dozens of letters, go back and forth between the two, because of course we know that of Verdi's obsession with his with the perfection of his librettos for his operas. Luzio calls the letters the most marvelous course in musical aesthetics in action, but Gossett feels there are several problems with Aida and the handling of these letters. Gossett's problems with the copia lettere. According to Gregory Harwood's A Guide to Giuseppe Verdi, a guide to research, Gossett points out that the Ghislanzoni letters to Verdi are reproduced in the wrong order, sometimes with fabricated dates and errors of transcription. This is not only seen in the copia lettere, but also in the abbiati. He also postulates a revised chronological order for the 35 letters, and he summarizes, their content. So here we have it. Gossett really has issues with the way the copia lettere is organized. And so he points out his three, things that just really get to him concerning Aida and these letters. And first is the absence of the critical edition of the score, reflecting authentic sources unencumbered by a spurious appeal to tradition. Secondly, the existence of several unpublished compositions for Aida. There are several versions of this score, and it's just very ambiguous, and it makes it very difficult for us to do an accurate study of the composition. And thirdly, the need for a complete and accurate edition of the correspondence between Verdi and Ghislanzoni. It's impossible to fully get the details of, how Verdi and his versifier, came up with this wonderful masterpiece if we don't even have the correct order of the letters. So Gossett, therefore, he takes the time, studies in detail these letters, and puts them in the best order that he knows how to. This is Gossett's new order of Verdi's use of conventional form in Aida. For the remainder of the article, Gossett um, basically discusses the compositional history of Aida and demonstrates how formal conventions established at the time of Rossini are heavily influenced in Verdi's approach in both text and opera. So in order for us to truly understand, what the formal conventions are, we must first define what they are. This was actually my favorite part of the article because Gossett eloquently describes and kind of compare and contrast the Verdi style versus the Rossinian style. He uses the fabulous Semiramide in our Seychelles duet from Semiramide, and it's perfectly divided into the Rossinian form that we just discussed. You see clearly the cabaletta, the cavatina, the tempo di mezzo, like everything is just there. And then he turns into and talks about the Alfredo Violetta duet from the Act 3 right before her death. And it's just mind blowing to me. It's clearly separated. Just in the Rossinian style. Gossett says that each of the duets in Aida belonged to that traditional family. And we read in the article that Verdi really wanted to try to change that conventional style and kind of stray away from those basic models, but it all fell back on the librettist. It was just very difficult, as you read in the letters, for him to grasp that concept, even though it still is one of the greatest. It's a fabulous opera. The Amneris Radime duet practically fulfills all of the requirements of a Rossinian model. And even in the Omanastro, Aida duet, it tries so hard to avoid them, it still finds its way in that model. So, we find that a true work really depends on the exemplification of convention. And so that's basically what the article discussed. I had a few issues with the article. I really, thought that Gossett had a lot of ideas that he was trying to present, and it almost seemed to me as if he was trying to make them sort of match. I think that these two ideas could have perfectly initially been two different entities or two different articles, because you kind of feel as if, even though he gives a lot of information, there's a lot to be said about those letters, and I think that they deserve their own article alone. I also, I thought that Gossett really Gossett really calls into question the validity of those dates from the Copia Lettere. And it's like mind-boggling to me because the way he explains it, he makes it seem as if they just kind of threw the letters together and took no kind of initiative to organize them properly. And it makes you think, is he really kind of being biased, or I really after this want to look at the letters in the original form and compare them to his, because I just find it so difficult to believe that, the compilers, the people who compiled these letters didn't take the time to, you know, try to put them in chronological order, because it just doesn't make it. It just wouldn't make any sense to not be able to read the correspondence between a librettist and a composer if they're not in order, and that's key into knowing which acts were written first, or what part of the text was versified before another part. I Overall, this was a great article, explained a lot, very informative, especially about the conventional form, and it opened my eyes to how close in relation the Rossinian style and the Verdian style, and Aida, as one of the later operas, even in the late part of the 19th century, you still cannot get away from Rossini and style, and it says a lot about Rossini, but it says a lot about Italian opera. It's just the essence of Italian opera. So when now we're able to critically listen to these Verdi operas, and especially when we get further down into the latter of his last two, with the Otello and the Falstaff, and see, is he able to successfully get away from the Rossinian style. I would like to thank you for watching my presentation. I hope it has been most informative, and I look forward to discussing this article in class. Have a blessed day.